Well, was an election 48 hours ago in the US. Did you follow that? How do you feel? 48 hours passed and emotions are still high, but some things are immediately evident, and I want to talk about those things. What happened? What does it mean? What did I learn? Why is it relevant for this channel? And why do I think this was overall a pretty historic election? Let's get into it. Of course, if it is your first time here, my name is Gigi. I do host this podcast called Hear Me Out, Just a Thought, where I do share my thoughts on current events, some critical thinking lessons, wisdom, and faith. So if this just sounds like what you are looking for after this very high energy 48 hours, click subscribe and let's stick together. Now, elections. So, of course, I am not an American citizen. I do not live in America. I live in Canada. But wherever you are in the world, I do think you hear a lot about American elections because they have an impact on the rest of the world. And where I am, you guys in the US, you are our southern neighbors. And so, of course, we feel everything and see everything from close. But we are just not as affected as you, and we're not actors in that election. So a quick recap, if you have missed it, there was this election cycle on November 5th, and Donald Trump got reelected, or I guess elected for the second time, but not consecutive time. He had been president in 2016 and lost in 2020, and now has secured himself the position for 2024. So of course, this was not an ordinary election cycle. I don't think these were ordinary candidates or an ordinary race. I will not personally go into the politics detail because it's not really the type of channel that I want to have, or not really my place, I believe, to be doing political commentary. But I do think the event itself is full of lessons that we can learn and apply to our lives. So let me jump straight into what I may have noticed and let me know what you think. And I think the first thing that I noticed immediately after the election results came out, and again, I live in Canada, right? And I'm still able to get an influx of reactions immediately from everywhere. So I cannot even imagine what it's like in the US, where you might have voted and might be the one reacting to this election. But what I noticed is that we are more connected than ever online, but we are more disconnected than ever in real life. We kind of live our lives on the internet sometimes, and we forget that internet is not real life. And the reason I am saying that is that I noticed the amount of people that were highly shocked of the result, and who kept saying, for example, I don't understand, I can't believe this is happening. What were they thinking? And the they meaning the population, the people that voted for this president-elect, was really high. I felt like there was this disconnect between what people think their neighbors want and what their neighbors actually want. And I think whether it was this candidate or another, I think this also stems from the era we are in, where we don't really talk much to other people in real life. We don't really connect at the grocery store. We don't really connect at like neighborhood events or anything like that. we stay connected online, and we're under the impression that we have a feel of what the world looks like and what people want, and what are people's priorities. But we don't really know, because if we're this surprised, it means we had another portrait in mind. And most times that portrait comes from being connected, being online, being on the internet, but forgetting that internet is not real life. So that's the first thing I immediately noticed. And of course, I think the lesson here would be to remember that and not treat the internet like the end all be all, or as something that represents the actual human being that is your neighbor, the actual person that is your neighbor, that has, just to play on some words here, some dreams and aspirations and ambitions or whatnot. So we need to bring back human interactions a little bit more, in my humble opinion, because the shock that I see people have down south is a little bit more than what I'm comfortable with. But I don't know, you let me know what you think. And then I realized also immediately, given the numbers, and of course if you're curious you can go look at that in your own time, but I realized that if you swing something really hard one way, of course it will swing back just as hard the other way. And this election cycle, again in the US, was so controversial, should I say, because both options that our neighbors in the US had were really extremely opposite, or at least that's what it seems, right? And so if you have had 4 years of something very specific and in a very clear direction, but on the more extreme side of things, you might have a reaction. And typically from what I have seen in my short life, because I want to pretend I'm young today, in my short life, is that when there's a strong ideology, whatever it may be, I'm not even necessarily talking about this specific election, but just in general, in cycles, when there's a strong ideology, the following one, or the following trend, or the following thing might be a reaction, a strong reaction to that one. And so sometimes when we go down some path and we really push it and push it and push it, you'll notice that there will be a birth of a movement that is opposed to that, or that is an immediate strong reaction to that. And so you have to expect these things at some point and not be as surprised as we all are, or as some people really purport to be. And I'm speaking very broadly here because you have guessed it, of course, I don't want to get into the details of things. I want to just extract the lessons from here. So I think here the lesson is we can come to expect, if we are moderate in things, the reaction will be moderate. But when we are a little bit more extreme in something, the reactions will also be extreme. That's that. Then, and this is the one I'm mostly interested in, I don't know if you have noticed, but traditional media is dead, you guys. Traditional media is dying. And I am particularly interested in this because there used to be a time where all of our information came from traditional media, like actual newspapers and television programs and news stations and just corporate media. And I realized throughout this election cycle that the media was saying something, and what ended up happening in terms of the reality of it all was completely different in terms of numbers, in terms of the vibe. Everything was completely different. And I'm always going to mention how we have to think for ourselves and how we have to always develop critical thinking, how to look for wisdom, like actual wisdom, meaning timeless truths. I personally believe that timeless truths come from places like the Bible, because the Bible is written by the creator of all things, or I guess is the word of the creator of all things. And so to me specifically, I have a place where I go look for timeless truths. But when we put our faith and our trust and we only believe what traditional media is telling us, I do think we notice now in 2024 that there's what traditional media says and there's the reality of things. And I won't lie to you, I am more and more into alternative media. Let me know how that sounds to you. But I feel like I like the fact that anybody can grab their mic and say things. Now, of course, we shouldn't idolize those, people either. We shouldn't elevate them to the same standard as traditional media, because why repeat the same mistake twice? But I do like the fact that the information we consume does not have to come from one place. And I do like the fact that human beings can exchange ideas as they wish, to see which ideas survive, which ideas die. Of course, there's danger of, as my friends from the US like to call it, disinformation or misinformation. But I think critical thought comes also from training our muscle, training our brains to eliminate things that are completely crazy, or to recognize things that are crazy, to identify and reject arguments that don't hold, with love and with respect to the person that is presenting them. But if we only hear one thing forever, if we only hear one message forever, which typically in the last few years is what traditional media has offered, I believe we slowly lose the ability to think. And we're not about that on this channel. I will always encourage the very opposite, which is to train ourselves to think. And so we have to be confronted to different ideas. And even in the faith world, if you have a religion, for example, if you have faith, if you are a Christian, for example, you need to be able to defend that faith. I don't believe we have to lock ourselves in our head and only communicate with people that are already Christian. Of course, we're called to go and make disciples, to go and talk about the joy that is within us and what we believe and why we believe it. And so we have to be ready to hear what any other person has to say, to then bring truth and arguments and evidence and observation and things like that. So the reason I am mentioning that traditional media is dead is we actually witnessed that the thing that happened was not the thing that media was saying. And I think that's a lesson to us to kind of look back and assess the place that traditional media has in our lives and what that means. And then Hollywood, one of the two candidates heavily relied on Hollywood actors and actresses and, influencers and people that are loved, should I say, to drive home a political message or to drive votes. And I was just really astonished to see that it did not work. It did not work. Again, look at that at your own time, whenever you have time, if you're interested. But it did not work, right? And so for me, again, that's a message to say, we might be in a new era where everyone, or at least most people, are not blindly following a leader that is Hollywood or media anymore. And again, that, I will openly say, makes me happy, because I didn't really like the idea of people following celebrities to make choices for their lives. And this is very much independent of these elections. I'm not saying, that Hollywood got it wrong or Hollywood got it right, and the people got it wrong or the people got it right. It's not my place here to say that, and that's not where I want to go. But I do want to say that to idolize anyone at all, a politician, a celebrity, an entertainer, a news anchor, to idolize anyone and put them on a pedestal and act as they say is a bad idea. And that's the best way I can think of to put my message today. It's a bad idea. And the sum of all these things, right? The being disconnected from our neighbor, the swinging really hard in one direction, the putting media and Hollywood on a pedestal and following blindly, the sum of all things bring us to a point, I think, where we lose the ability to think and make good decisions. And so the reason all of this is relevant for this channel, which I hope you like, of course, which I hope brings value to you, which I hope makes you think, is that we have to look for wisdom at all times. We have to make choices that are wise. We have to be aware of our environment and of the people that surround us. And to do so, we have to look at this world for real. And we have to use our critical thought. We have to think for ourselves. We have to connect with humans. We have to not put faith in humans because they will inevitably disappoint us. And when we put our faith in humans and in parties, what happens typically is that we start to be divided as people. We start to look at the other person as, are you part of my tribe or not? And if you're not, then you're not human anymore. You're this thing that I can make fun of, for example. You're this thing that I can reject. You're not human in my eyes anymore. But I want to bring home the fact, or I guess the point, that there is one government, and this is the giant plug that I'm about to do, which if you follow this channel, there's no surprise here, but there is a government that tells you whoever is your neighbor, love on them. Whoever is your neighbor, respect them. Whatever ideology you have fundamental rights because you are a human being and you're a marvelous creature. Whoever is your representative for today, for tomorrow, for the month, for 4 years, you already have the ultimate representative who sacrificed himself for you without asking anything. And all of these sentences that I'm saying, I'm talking about God. I'm talking about the kingdom of God. I'm talking about the children of God. And we can fight all day to say, this party is best, that party is not, this is evil, this is not, I'm right, you're wrong, you're this, you're that. But when you look at the world and other people with the eyes of God, you understand a few things, and you are protected from falling into some, not all, but some tendencies to forget and disconnect and hate on people and be shocked and just follow blindly celebrities or media. And so I want to encourage you to take that into consideration. And whatever your political ideologies are, if you are super happy that the election turned out the way it did, or you're devastated, to remember that in the long run, this will matter, but not that much, guys. Not that much. In the end, it's about you, your choices, the disposition of your heart. And I will always remind you that whoever is in front of you, however way they vote, even if you're tempted to be confrontational with them or even insulting with them, remember that everyone has reasons for the way they act. Everyone has a story, everybody has trauma, everybody has been lied to in the past. I'm sure you can remember a period of time when you thought one thing and then you changed your mind. And so approach things with kindness and remember that I will plug this passage anytime that I get the chance. Remember Ephesians 6:12. Remember Ephesians 6:12. You're not fighting against flesh and blood. There's other things happening as well. There's other motives, or there are things that are happening that are not clear to the eyes. And so what you see is maybe people that you think are dumb, or people that you think have got it wrong, or people that you think are against you. But sometimes we forget that behind all of this, there's a fight, between good and evil. And it's really that simple. There are two governments, but the two governments that we think are not it. There's the government of God and there's the government of Satan. And I do think it's high time that we remember that when we have elections like these ones. And for anybody who's outside of the US, like me, just witnessing this, kind of eating your popcorn and being like, what is going on? Often these type of events kind of tell us what's going to happen next. And so to me, it's always interesting to look at it and extract any lesson that I can, analyze it, or kind of look at it and ask myself, what did I learn, right? I don't want to immerse myself too much in it because I'm outside, or I don't want to get caught up. But what did I learn? What can I apply now to my life? What warning did I see in that? And of course, what does God think of all this? Like, what does God think of worldly leaders and worldly authorities and the way we react when we're happy or unhappy? Are we condescending? Are we insulting people? Do we shut off and disconnect even more? And so I want to ask myself this and catch myself if I can, but also engage with others, because sometimes the conversation opens up some space for reminders and correction. And so that's why I thought it was good to grab my mic as always and tell you what I think. Of course, I want to also know what you think. Are you in the US? I know from the demographics that I see that the listeners here are US. Part of it is US. So are you there? Did you vote? Did you not vote? Are you happy? Are you not happy? But also, what lessons have you learned, if any? It might be too soon. 48 hours might be too soon. But what did you learn? And how do you feel? Let me know. Of course, send this to someone who would need to have these reminders. And if this was an interesting video for you, hit the like button to let me know. And of course, hit the subscribe button so we can stick together and do this often. Keep the conversation going. I will see you next time.